Dear brothers and sisters in Christ, gathered through live streaming from all corners of the Archdiocese, and all who are joining us this morning, we now enter into this holiest of weeks at this strangest of times. Thank you for joining us on this walk from life to death to new life. It would have been easier today if the gospel we heard at the start of today's Mass, Jesus' triumphant entry into Jerusalem, would have been the only gospel we'd heard this morning. We could have been pondering what it was like to have been there, a great prophet coming, a king arriving on a donkey. We could have pondered how the people of Jerusalem viewed Jesus, the many different attitudes towards him, and what led people to laying down palm branches before him. It could have been enough to start us gently towards what would eventually happen there. But the Church does not allow us to sit there for long. Instead, we hear the recitation of the Passion, this year from Matthew's Gospel. And we are pulled, drawn, willingly or unwillingly, into the death and resurrection of Jesus. The Church doesn't let us rest with the procession of Jesus into Jerusalem because there is a deeper mystery to be pondered, a paschal mystery. And in today's liturgy, it is above all else the tensions in the readings, the seeming contradictions that move us towards Good Friday and Easter. The procession of joy welcoming Jesus into Jerusalem soon turns into a procession to Calvary. The crowds go from laying down palms before him to shouting, "Crucify him." At the beginning of our celebration, Jesus is acclaimed a king. "Behold, here comes your king, humble, riding on a donkey." At the end of our gospel, this king is crowned, but with a crown of thorns. At the beginning, at least in St. Luke's account, we remember the wonderful words of Jesus as the crowds are silenced. If every tongue were still, the rocks and stones themselves would start to sing. At the end, the stones are silent and Jesus is buried in a rock in the tomb. The first reading speaks about a disciple chosen by God. Morning after morning, he opens my ears that I may hear, that I may know how to speak to the weary. But soon after, that servant is being beaten and spat upon. These tensions run through the readings. We move from promise to pain. The one who comes to bring us the fullness of life is poured out, empties himself. The God who never forsakes us cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" The eternal Word is silent before Pontius Pilate. The source of life is put to death. The Church doesn't let us sit with the procession of palms because it insists that we be drawn into the depths of the mystery at the heart of our lives and at the heart of our faith. A mystery that has to do with God's way of transforming and redeeming the world, transforming and redeeming us. As we launch into Holy Week, permit me to offer you 3 brief thoughts. First, in the liturgies of today and the coming days, we are being invited into a vortex of pain. We do so because it really happened 2,000 years ago, and we do so because it happens in our lives. and in our world. The pandemic that is upon us has brought us into a vortex of pain. So many people all around us are suffering. We and our families are suffering. People have lost jobs. People's lives are completely disrupted. People's future is in jeopardy. People are suffering. People are isolated. People are dying. We live in a world right now marked by deep and profound pain. It is all around us. And if we are to find hope, and if we are to find redemption and meaning and purpose in this life, we need a meaningful response to pain and suffering. God walks with us in this pain. We would like to get to resurrection quickly, but we need to sit through the Passion today and again on Good Friday before we get to the resurrection. We know it's coming. The apostles didn't. We have that help, but there's no shortcut through the dying. God did not design the human condition with a shortcut through suffering and dying. We live that in a small way liturgically, and we live it in a much larger way as individuals and as society in our lives. Secondly, in Jesus, what we see in these days, in these seeming contradictions, is love fully given. For us, most often in our Passion, it's not chosen. There isn't an escape hatch and we must endure. But with Jesus, fully human, fully God, there is a choice. There is a temptation. Jesus doesn't choose suffering. He chooses love. But when love becomes costly, when love becomes crucifying, when the Father saw what was happening to him, he didn't draw away and say, okay, it's enough, come down from the cross. He could have. This is love's finest hour, its most radiant and most costly hour. It's the moment when we come to know what we most desperately need to know: the radical love of God for us, God's self-giving, redeeming, suffering love. It's the moment when God takes upon himself all our shortcomings, all the outright failures, all the stupidities and misguided priorities, all the wrong choices, all the darkness, and says to us, "Yet still do I love you. Even now do I desire to redeem you." Third and last, we are not invited to these services as bystanders, as listeners only. Even though we watch and listen from our own homes, we are invited into the Passion with our lives. The Eastern Rite traditions on Good Friday have a beautiful tradition where they set up an arch which represents the tomb, and all of the people process into the tomb. It's a way of giving expression to the fact that we as Christians are called to enter deeply with our lives into the mysteries we are celebrating. So I invite you this year, when you may, some of you will have more time than you've ever had before, to enter deeply into this Holy Week. Enter deeply into each of the celebrations and bring your sorrow and bring your sufferings. Bring your grief and your brokenness. Bring your struggles, your longings, your unfulfilled hopes into the depths and meaning of the Last Supper, when Jesus takes bread into his hands and breaks it for us. Bring your struggles into his betrayal, into the loneliness of Gethsemane, into the trial, the lies, the denial by his friends, and into the passion and the suffering and the love that's revealed there. Enter into the tomb and wait. Wait for the power of God to come to bring life. Do that so that you know a little more after this week how to be his disciple, how to live and love as one, how to speak as one, how to carry pain as one, how to do your part in God's great redeeming work, undoing the power of death, how to be an instrument of resurrection in our broken and confused world. Enter in. Do not be afraid. Love reigns here. God has the last word. Enter in so that you might learn something of how to live a Paschal life, even here and even now.